Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Kiddushin daf Tes Vav. We are going to begin on Tes Vav Amud Aleph, about 8 lines from the top. My time in the Tanakama. So we were learning whether or not a person learns a Gzer Shava called Sachar Sachar, and based on that, we're trying to connect the dinim of selling yourself versus being sold by Beis Din. Now, we saw there was actually 4 different things that potentially could be different between selling yourself and being sold to Beis Din, being sold by Beis Din. One is, can you work more than the 6 allotted years as an Eved Ivri? Second of all, we wanted to know whether or not you could become a Nirtza if you choose to. Third, as we're going to be seeing shortly, whether or not there's a din of Hanukah, of giving gifts upon the Eved Ivri leaving. And lastly, whether or not you can give him a Shifcha Kananas. And there's a machlokis whether or not that applies only by Mechira Beis Din, from the Beis Din selling you, or even yourself. Now, it makes sense if you compare the two, then that's Sachar Sachar. But we're saying that really everyone holds this to Gzer Shava. It's based on psukim as to why they make these distinctions between being sold by yourself versus Beis Din. So now we're up to the explanation of the third one. My taima the Tanakama de Omer Meicher Atzma in Manikinlo. Why, when you sell yourself, we don't give gifts upon his leave? Mir Rachman Gabi Mechoro Beis Din, because the pasuk says only by Beis Din who sells them. The Hanik Taniklo. Lo, to him you should give gifts. Lo Meicher Atzmo. Because you can again think about it. If in fact you may just be interested in getting gifts. So let's say you'll sell yourself, and let's say Yovel's coming up in a week. So big deal. I'll be a slave for a week, and then he's gonna be obligated. We're gonna see to give a certain amount of gifts to me. So maybe it doesn't work. The iduch. So what does the other one do with this? Says Rashi, Imlo hispik haniko ad shemes. Let's say the master didn't have the ability to give the gifts like he was supposed to, and then the master died, and he was going free anyway. But the question is, does his heirs, do the Yarshim also now have to give the gifts? No. Yarshav amai lo sacher kari rachmana ma sacher pulasol yarshav of high pulasol yarshav. Actually, that's not true. We actually should say that Pu'ulaso, Sachar Pu'ulaso, the reward for this Eved's work goes to the Yarshim. So too, they should be obligated to pay up and give these gifts. So therefore that's not true. Actually, according to this, the Yarshim do have to give Hanukah. It means only the Eved Ivri and not to a Balchov. What does that mean? Says Rashi, Ein ha'adon mechuyev l'hagvos ha'aniko l'balchoivoi, that the master is not obligated to collect these gifts and give them to the Balchoiv. Mishum desfirlan ba'alma karav nosen di'erma ha'noisa chaver mana v'chaver chaver moitzim ezem v'nosim l'zeh itzrach ha'miyuti ha'nokim ha'haydina. So normally we have the Shibud Rav Nosson, Ma'amar Shloshan it's called, in which if I owe you $100 and you owe this other guy $100, so instead of A paying B then B paying C, A can pay directly to C, just as long as all 3 of them are present. It's acceptable. So maybe it's the same thing, that the Adain there's a din that he should be giving it to the Balchoiv. So if let's say the Eved owes money, well, mashal, so instead of, he gives the gifts to him, and not that he can't be forced to say, oh, why don't you just give it direct to my Balchoiv? Okay. As we see in the Gemara now. We typically hold of Shibud Rav Nosson. Sanyam Rav Nosson Benayin Lo Nesim B'Chaver Man B'Chaver Manayin Shemaitim Mizem Nesim L'Zet Amun Amun Asher Asham Loi. So the pasuk says that you can give, if A owes B and B owes C, then it can go directly from A to C. So asalo lafuke, you can't give the gifts directly to the other's creditor. So that's what it's come to tell you. Okay, v'idoch, how does the other one know that? But almanam lo svirun k'Rav Nosson. I don't hold like Rav Nosson. I don't hold this notion, therefore I don't need a pasuk. Okay, let's look at question 13. Hanik tanik lo mi mismayit mahakosavoy. What does it come to exclude? So according to one, it's coming to exclude Meicher Atzmo. And the other one is coming to say it's excluding Baal Chayvoy. Okay, weiter. Finally, my time to come to Meicher Atzmo in Rabba Meisel Shim Chanayis. How come when it comes to, if you sell yourself, that the master cannot give you a Shiv Chananis so you can procreate? Because my Basin, who sells him, only there it says that the Adon can give the Eved Ivri a Shiv Chananis. Im Adon of Yitin Lo Isha. Lo V'lo Moicher Atzma. Only to him he gives a Shiv Chananis. Because he was sold by Basin. The Pasuk's talking about Machur Basin, not selling yourself. Idach Lo Bal Karchoi. It means you can even force him to take her. Ve'idach Mechim Mishnah Sachar Sachar Nafka. He actually learns it out from this double language. It says Mishnah Sachar Sachar. The poor guy has to do like double time. He has to work day and night. So that's how we learn out, even against his will. The Stanya. Ki Mishnah Sachar Sachar Avdacha. Sachar Enu Oived El B'yoyim. It means you only work during the day. Eved Ivri is Oived Ben B'yom Ben B'layil. He has to work day and night. V'chis Al Daitach Sheved Ivri Oived Ben B'yom Ben B'layil. He has to work day and night. V'lo Kvar Nemer Ki Tavo Yimach Yimach B'mach B'mach B'mishta. You have to be nice to this guy. You have to give him. You have to eat with him. You have to drink with him. You can't. If you're having good food, you have to give him the good food. You can't just treat him less than everyone else. So how can you tell me that he has to work day and night? So it doesn't really mean work at night. It's just a nice way of saying what happens at night is that he's going to end up procreating and having tashmish and being with this woman, and that could be forced. The idach. How does the other one know this? You would think it's only with his consent, not bal karchai. That's what the pasuk is coming to tell you. Okay. After all of this, now the Gemara wonders again, who doesn't hold this Gezer Shava? Haitan who desanya. The pasuk says v'shav el mishpachtoi. He'll return to his family v'gomer. This is by someone who is moicher atzmo. This is in the Pashup Shat, it's referring to someone who sells himself. Omer Belezer ben Yaakov b'ma'akas medaber. Now, what is this pasuk referring to? This is what Rashi says beferish. B'moicher atzmo ksiv loimer sheyetze b'yovel. That someone who sells himself, he still can go back to his family on the Yovel year. Now, again, b'ma'akas medaber. B'moicher atzmo. Even though B'Pashtut is talking about Meicher Atzmo, that once Yovel comes, even though it's in the 6 years, he still gets to go free, Harik for Omer. That we already established. As Rashi says, we saw before, it says, Ad Shnas HaYovel Yavad Imach, that you're supposed to work until the Yovel year. That's what it says. So you already have a pasuk that tells you that if within that time frame Yovel comes, that he goes free. We already know that. Even Nirtza Harik for Omer. Also by Nirtza, that he also goes free. The pasuk is coming to tell you that even if you sold by Basin, that even though the pasuk, the Pashtus is talking about Meicher Atzmo, we're using this pasuk to tell us even Machur Basin goes free by Yovel. Now it must be he doesn't hold of this Gezer Shava, because if he held of this Gezer Shava, then you wouldn't have to have made this whole drasha. You would say the dinim are the same. Just like Meicher Atzmo, he goes free by Yovel, so too Meicher Beistin. So it must be this is the Tana who does not hold of Sachar Sachar. Maybe if you sell yourself, you didn't do anything wrong. You're just, for whatever reason, you just want to become a slave. Says Rashi, the lagun of klum. So, since you stole, maybe you would think that even if Yovel is in between, we're still not going to let you go free, because it's a kanas that fact that you're a ganav, we're not going to let you go free. Kamash Malon, that's why we need this drasha, even though really you do learn sachar. But over here, since you would maybe think Machor Beis Din is the situation where the guy was a ganav, and therefore the Beis Din had to intervene and sell you. So therefore, in that situation, maybe you would think that he would not go free by Yovel. That's why I need to know the pasuk. So Mahi, what do you mean? We already learned out that a nirtza goes free. Where do we see that? The pasuk says, "Vishavtem ish el chuzaso ish el mishpachta v'goymer." So we're going to be focusing on the words "vishavtem," the word "ish," and then again "va'ish." So what does that mean? What is this pasuk referring to? So we already know that a merch atzma goes free, as we saw in Rashi from another pasuk when it comes to Yovel. We just established also this pasuk of Shalom Mishpachtoi that's referring to Machor Beis Din. So therefore, it has to be. There's no other situation. So let's talk about a nirtza. That even though he's only worked a couple of years, he can still go free. So my mashma, how do we see from this pasuk that's referring to a nirtza? So Rabbi Barshil Omerkra Ish Ezu Davar Shnei Beisha and Shnei Beisha Havi Omer Zu Ritzia. The fact that it keeps saying Ish in the pasuk, it's referring to a situation of this person who only a man is shaykh to be in this position, and not a woman, and that's a nirtza, because a woman cannot become a nirtza, as we established on the top of the Talmud yesterday's daf. And we need both of them. We need lemechta machur beis din, v'isruch lemechta nirtza. We already know that we need to mention Mocher Atzmo. Just because it says Mocher Atzmo, you would think maybe only he goes free by Yovel because he didn't steal. But Mocher Beis Din, since he stole, maybe he doesn't go. But we also need a pasuk that he goes free by Yovel if he was sold by Beis Din, and a nirtza. Diashmin Mocher Beis Din Mishel Medoloi Mati Zimne. He didn't finish his time. Of a nirtza de Mati Zimne, he did his 6 years. Ema Niknase. Maybe we should kanas him and say, after all, the pasuk says, "Ki ovadai heim," as Rashi quotes. You're supposed to be avadam to Hashem, v'hu kaina adon la'atzmo chinam, and you for no reason you just became you decided to acquire an adain. So therefore, maybe we're going to kanas you and not allow you to go free when it comes to a nirtza. Like, why did you put yourself in that position? So we're not. The fact that Yovel comes, too bad. You're stuck there. You can look at it the other way around. At least since the guy did work 6 years, and the master is not really losing anything out because he did his time. So therefore, maybe we'll let him go. But someone who was Machor Beis Din, who stole, and within the 6 years, so the master's going to be losing out. You should let him continue and finish up his time even after Yovel Kamashmon. Which is this pasuk V'shavtem Yishal Chusasai. V'yisrach Lemechta B'Oylam. And we also need a pasuk L'Oylam. What is that? It says Rashi Ba'avadoi L'Oylam. V'Olam Shel Yovel. This is referring to the year of Yovel. Rashi says T'tfei Mihachi Leikel Meimar. Can't be more than Yovel. The Haksiv Krachrina V'shavtem Ish. Then he goes back, and that's talking about a nirtza. So obviously, it can't be you stay there forever as a slave, because it says v'shavtem. At a certain point, you do go back. So why do you need both these psukim? So v'yisrach mechtav v'shavtem v'yisrach mechtav l'oylam. Dikas rachman l'oylam havim l'oylam mamish. Maybe we think actually he has to stay there forever because of rachman v'shavtem. The shavtem tells you no, that he does go free at a certain time. Maybe only if he didn't work six years. If he works 6, his end term shouldn't be worse than his first. That don't say, oh, okay, if you're a nirtza, so you should only work another 6 years. No. You have to continue to work all the way until Yovel. Who is this Tana we're trying to figure out all the way from this previous daf, who is the Tana that doesn't connect Sachar Mochor based into Mochor Atzmai? Rabbi. It's the opinion of Rabbi. So make sure we don't have any questions over here. Okay. Who's Rabbi? The Sanya, as we continue to Tes Vav Amud Beis. The pasuk says, "V'im lo yigael ba'ela." If you're not redeemed with these, now what is that referring to? Rashi says, "Ben nimchar l'avik." Someone who was sold to a non-Jew. So you have an Eved Ivri that was sold to an Avik Chavim, which we already established that does work. Is your kaina the Avik Chavim is kaina with kesef. So you have the ability to be redeemed, but you were not redeemed be'ela. Rashi says be'kroivim. So we're going to see, because the pasuk next to it says ododo, referring to your uncle, your relatives redeeming you. So therefore, it means that you were not redeemed by your relatives. So Rabbi Omer be'ela hu yigoil, that only can he be redeemed with relatives if you were purchased, an Eved Ivri was purchased by an Avik Chavim. Deinu nigol b'sheish. And he's not going to be able to be redeemed at 6, within 6 years. Again, that's what it's referring to. And therefore, obviously, he also doesn't go out by Yovel. He's not going to go out by Sheish, he's not going to go by Yovel. If you sell yourself to an Avik Chavim, the din is you can be redeemed, but only with money by your relatives, not by a certain amount of years, not by Yovel. Shiach v'lo dinu. Maybe you would think of Kal V'chomer. What would be the Kal V'chomer? B'halu dinu ma mi she'enu nigol be'eleh. So let's say someone who is sold to Yisrael, an Eved Ivri is sold to Yisrael. There's no din of being redeemed by relatives in particular. Nigol b'sheish, but you go out with 6 years. So Zeds, the person who was sold to an Akum, shenigol be'eleh, that he's redeemed with relatives, and din shenigol b'sheish, Talmud learn be'el hu nigol be'el nigol b'sheish. So again, we learn that if you're an Eved Ivri sold to an Akum, he's only redeemed with relatives and not going free with years, 6 years, or Yovel. Now, if you want to learn on Gzer Shava, of Sachar, that is, we said we compare selling Machor based into Machor Atzmo, which again is really referring to selling yourself to a Jew. So why do we say Uma mi she'enu nigol be'ela? Why do we say this whole notion of this Kal V'chomer nail of Sachar? Why don't we just learn out this Gzer Shava? Says Rashi, Ge'ulas Kroivim when Nimchol Yisrael, the redeeming of relatives, if you were sold to Yisrael, Menimchol Avik Chavim. The Menimchol Avik Chavim namiksiv kisachar shana v'shani imo. It's a little bit of a twist over here, because again, Sachar, what we were learning up until now, is linking selling yourself to a Jew, based in selling yourself to a Jew. But it also says Sachar by selling yourself to an Avik Chavim. So if you hold Sachar, you would think they're all connected. So the question is, why need a Kal V'chomer? You can just have this Gzer Shava to link them. So so this must be that the fact that he came up with this is because he doesn't hold of this Gzer Shava at all. But it's different over here. That you'll redeem him. Lazeh v'lo l'acher. So, because it's a diuk in the pasuk, again, that there's only the ability to redeem him in this situation because he was sold to an Avik Chavim, that there's a din of relatives redeeming you, but therefore it's not in any other cases. So really, maybe he does hold Sachar, but not in this case. Can you connect them? Uman Tana de Polgale, the Rabbi, who is the Tana that argues that even Mechiras Akum, that he'll go out with Shanim. So again, Rabbi holds that if you sell yourself to an Akum, you only go out with Kroivim, with relatives redeeming you, but not with Shanim, not with Yovel. So it's actually Machlokas. there's someone who says that you could actually that you could actually go free with shanim even if you're sold to an akum. Who is that? Rabbi Yosef Glili, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yosef Glili and Rabbi Akiva are the ones that present this machlokas, that they argue regarding this. And there's a question popping up over here. Let me just read it quickly. 13. Mehem svaras hamachlokas Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi, Hadi Amr Kravi Yatsa B'Shnas HaYayvel Area Begulas Acherim Begulas Krivim L'Shibud. Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about here. So Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Akiva decided, well, Yigal Be'ela. The pasuk says you're not allowed to redeem them with relatives. Rabbi Yossi Guli Omer Be'el L'Shechor B'Shar Kol Adam L'Shibud. Okay, now when it comes to with these in this situation, they'll go free. However, B'Shar Kol Adam, if anyone else does it, they can keep him as a slave for themselves. That's what Rabbi Yossi Guli says. It says Lo Yigal Be'elas, which means that the relatives redeem him, so then he'll go free. And you're not going to have to work for your relatives. Probably not a fun thing, working for your relatives. When they redeem you, the redemption is to go free completely, which is the diak is that if anyone else redeems you, which they can redeem you, but when they redeem you, they also you have to work for them. Which is actually an interesting flip. No, when it comes to the relatives, they can redeem you, but that means you have to work for your relatives. However, anyone else who redeems you, they go free. So my time with Rabbi Yosef Galili, why does Rabbi Yosef Galili think that the relatives who redeem you, you go free, but everyone else you work for, you don't redeem, you're not redeemed with relatives, el ba'acher, rather with someone else, and then you can go out in the Yovel year. In other words, because those other people you have to work for, and you have to work for them until Yovel. If you're only redeemed by your relatives, and therefore, using that language of Ela Be'ela to kind of like throw that word in to understand the pasuk in its context a little bit better, it means when your relatives redeem you from an akum, then you have to work for them until Yovel. Rabbi Yosef Glili Midi Ela Be'ela Ksiv. He says, I understand. It doesn't say Ela Be'ela. So why are you adding something in? That's hard to understand. That's the basis of why you would think that you still have to work for your relatives. Actually, it's based on the maskana, at least we're thinking up until this point, that it's based on the following psukim. O dodo, o ben dodo. So when it comes to the relatives, it specifies who these people are. Your uncle's son. Yigalenu, they redeem you. So ze gu'ulas krayvim. Obviously, this is referring to that your relatives are redeeming you. Then the pasuk says, "O hasiga yadai," that or his hand abstains. Ze gu'ulas atzmo. This is redeeming yourself. V'nigal, when it says v'nigal zu gu'ulas acher, others redeeming you. So all of these people could forcefully buy out this Yisrael, from this Akum. Rabbi Yosef Guli Savar Mikra Nidru Shulfanov, you read the pasuk before, Shadi Gu'ulas Krayvim Gu'ulas Atzmo, and wherefore we connect redeeming of relatives to redeeming yourself. Ma Gu'ulas Atzmo, just like if you redeem yourself with Shechor, obviously you're going free, you're not working for yourself. Av Gu'ulas Krayvim with Shechor. So too, when your relatives redeem you, you go free. Rabbi Kiva Savar Mikra Nidru Shlachar. Actually, you read backwards. Shadi Gu'ulas Acher Ma Gu'ulas Atzmo. Ma Gu'ulas Atzmo l'Shechor. Just like obviously again, if you redeem yourself, you go free. Av Gu'ulas Acher l'Shechor. So the question is just, how do you read the pasuk? Are you connecting Gu'ulas Atzmo to before or afterwards, and therefore based on that, it will be who is the one who redeemed you with money? Was it others or your relatives? And therefore that'll be totally on who you're going to be working for or not working for. Ihachi Be'ela Lamuli. So then why need this whole pasuk of Be'ela? Says Rashi, That if normally you do make a drasha before and afterwards, but over here it says Eila with these relatives, it really goes back to the original source. How does he know that it's going to referring to your relatives? To Elav Be'ela, because if the pasuk didn't say Ela Hamamina, says the Gemara, you would think Mikra Nidrish Ben Lefon Ben Lacharav, Vakol L'Shechor. The pasuk is telling you that you can't go both ways. The fact that it says Ela, it's coming to like a miyut, that only certain people are going to continue working for and others not. So therefore you can't, even though if you're Nigel Atzmo from an Akum, then certainly you're going to go free. You're not working again for yourself. But it's not that you can therefore say the same din applies both by Kroivim relatives redeeming you and just strangers, stam people redeeming you. So the question should go back to its place, which is actually the Rashi I saw before. El B'Svara Kimifigi. So Maskana, it's a Svara. Rabbi Yossi Guli Savar Mistam Gulas Acher Mashibud. It makes sense if someone else on the street, who's not your relative, is going to redeem you, he's doing it to buy you. If in fact it's only to go free, he's not going to redeem you. Why is he going to want to redeem you? If he knows he has to pay thousands of dollars and he gets nothing out of it, he's not going to do it. But we want you to not be an Eved Ivri to an Akum. That's not a good environment. So we want you to be redeemed. But if the person knows that by redeeming you, you're just going to go free, he's not going to do it. Actually, it makes more sense if it's your relatives you're going to work for. Why? If you go free, you're going to constantly sell yourself to an akum. Because I'm going to know my relatives are going to end up bailing me out, and I'll end up going free. And therefore, because of that, I'm just going to constantly do this, and everything will be fine. Question 14. My svarder became this real de krav yatzim shnas hayovel iri begulas krayvim l'shibud, because otherwise you're just going to want to redeem yourself. You're just going to keep selling yourself to an akum, right? And because you're going to think, oh, my relatives are going to constantly redeem me. Because again, if it's gulas acherim, some stranger, that why would they spend all this money to redeem you? More likely they're not going to end up doing that. That was question 14, and this I think is identical to TB 13. Mehem svaras hamachlokes to become Rabbi Yehuda of Rabbi Yossi Yehadi Amar Krabi Yatzim Mishnasa Yavel Gulas Acherim Gulas Kraivim. Let me see what I wrote. L'maskanas Gemara Tali B'Svara Ulai Im Hu Meicher Harbe Pam. If he sells himself many times, Hemel writes him Luparko. They're not going to want to redeem him. Behu Adain Eved. He'll still be a slave. Oh, Anachnu L'Chayshish B'Zeh. We're not afraid. Shame Parkinoisa. They'll redeem him. Ava Anachnu writes him Shekol Pam B'Pam Hu Mesim Es Atzmo Eved. It's not exactly the answer, but again, a person, if it's Acherim, you're not going to want to sell yourself. You're not gonna want to redeem such a guy because it's getting ridiculous already. It's like, why would I want to do that? Especially, I'm not getting anything out of it. So therefore, maybe in that situation, it would not work. Okay, let's see what he writes. 13. Okay, that's the correct answer. All right. Okay. Let's get to the two dots. This was, again, the machlokas between these opinions. When do you go free? When do you have to still work for the person who redeems you? He actually says, no, you always go completely free, no matter what. When you're redeemed, you always go free. It's like Rabbi. He used the word Eila for a different drasha, not to say that you cannot be darshan l'fanav al-charav. And since he uses Eila to teach us something else, therefore Yidaka do learn l'fon of charav that just like by gulas atzmo you go free, and there's no shibud. So too when it comes to if you're redeemed by your relatives or by acher. Rabbi havi yotze b'shnas hayovel ma'yavidle. So what does he do with this pasuk? It says he goes up on the Yovel years. We continue to test Zion Amud Aleph. Are we talking about an Ovid Kachavim in which he's under the Israel's control? Maybe it's referring to an Ovid Kachavim who is not under the Jews' control. Amen. I'll tell you. There's only one Akam or under our dominion, and he's a slave to an Akam until he's redeemed by Yovel, or redeemed by Kroivim or Acherim. Obviously, because if we don't have any control over it, then how are we able to institute such laws? Okay, I'm going to stop there. I think we have one more question. TA12. Eved Ivri Hanimchol Akom V'Nigol Alidei Kroivim Alidei Acherim Him Shtabed Lemi Shigolu O Shechor. Okay, that's a good question. So, what's the din? Does he have to work? So it's a three-way machlokas. One opinion says, Rabbi Yosef argue, you either have to work for your relatives or for the person, the acherim who redeemed you. However, Rabbi says, Hakol l'shechor, that every situation you always, when you're redeemed, go free. Adkan.